Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Between the Covers. This evening, I'm speaking with Andrew Hood, the author of The Man Who Corrupted Heaven, which is a fantastic book and journey, and we're going to pick his brain on how he created such a wonderful story to take us on that journey. So welcome, Andrew. How are you?
Thank you, Bradley. I'm well. Very excited to be on this call or on this video. So thank you for your time.
You're most welcome. And so tell us more tell everyone about the man who corrupted heaven. Give us that premise.
Yeah, sure. Look, you know what? I was driving down the road and somebody on the radio said, when you die, you can't take anything with you, right? And this little saying just sort of went around in my mind. It got me thinking so much, I turned off the radio and pulled over. And I just kept thinking to myself, why not? And you know, what happened if I did want to take something with me? What would I take? And what would I use it for when I got there? Or, you know, and so all of these things started to go around in my head. And I wrote down two lines. You know, they say when you die, you can't take anything with you. One man, Isaac McGlynn, was determined to prove that wrong. And I just made that name up on the spot because I just felt like it needed a name. I had no idea I was writing a book, but that was the start of the book. And from there, it just sort of went on and built into something great that I'm really proud of.
Awesome. So was it hard in that sense when it's so, I guess you had an epiphany, but was it hard for an actual constructed story to evolve, or was it all inspirational where you just waited for every epiphany with the chapters and went, oh, that's the piece I'll put in?
Well, you know what? I'll be honest, and I call myself, it's probably the wrong word to use, but I call myself a bit of a dirty writer. And I say that not because I write dirty things, but because I don't really have a set routine. I'm 2 or 3 books in now, and I'm not very good at plotting. I've tried it a few times. So I say I make things up as I go, but I don't. I sort of let the story tell itself sometimes. I know that might not sound very exciting, but I find that if I have an idea of where I want to go, but the story itself wants to go somewhere else, I'm sort of forcing it if I force it down the path. So I just sort of let it go as it comes. But I do have an idea of the sort of story I want to tell. So that's where I went with that one. I sort of had an idea of the sort of story I wanted to tell, but it was really I'd written some other things in the past. This was the first time I was writing a full-length book. You're doing a blog. Hard work. I was doing a lot of blog writing, which is fine, and you can crystallize an idea over a few thousand words. But writing a novel was another thing altogether for me. So.
Had it been something that you'd been trained in or learned before, or was it something you just endeavoured on your own without that, and then sort of did you gain advice along the way? How did the process of writing the novel work for you?
Yeah, so I was a musician. You know, I used to love writing songs. I've written a lot of songs, and that taught me about, words are important. You don't want to put extra words in or the wrong words, and a song structure is just thrown out altogether. So always had that creativity. At one point I started writing blog posts because I just wanted to crystallize a few ideas in my head, and I can't always do that sometimes unless I write them down. So for me, it's a way of sort of crystallizing a thought. And then I learned that I liked that. I really liked that process. And, what I realized one day after I'd been doing the blog for a year or two is that, 50 odd blog posts was the length of a book. So I went, well, I could write a book, maybe I could write a book. And I really enjoyed it so much. And then I just swamped myself with the craft, right? I wanted to listen to every podcast. I read every book. I must have read 7 books on writing. I must have listened to, 100 podcasts on the process. For me, there's a little anxiety in my background, right? So if I'm going to do anything, I can't just do it. I have to do it to the absolute, peak of what I'm capable of. And this book couldn't just be a little fable. Like it had to be something that I was going to be proud of and show friends and people. And, so I set a pretty high standard for myself.
And you did that really well for your first book. It's been, a milestone of of the trilogy, isn't it? I think you said, is it a trilogy?
Yeah. Well, it was never meant to be. It was
Yeah.
only ever meant to be one book, and then I finished it. And one of my favorite characters in the book was actually not the lead character. And other people said, "Hey, I want to know more about what happens to this person." And as I was finishing up the book, I could see that it was going to be three. So there's three characters in the book, and each of them will have their own book. So the first sets up the. Sorry.
That was the identity of the characters being the trilogy. That's what I mean, where you came up with, because you didn't plot, you didn't plan. So I thought, how did you identify it as a trilogy? Like, when did you realize it was going to become more? So, but that was it, the three characters you identified.
I think right at the end, Bradley. So I didn't even know till the end. And then I went and thought, you know what, there's more that needs to be said here. Like, I'm not finished in this universe, and that's what I call it. In that universe, there's still a little bit more.
Oh, wow. So how's the trilogy coming along? Are we looking for second and thirds soon?
Yes, so book one's done, you have it, and that'll come out very soon. Book two is finished, and we'll go through its editing process over the next few months. And I'm probably just short of halfway on book three. And I'll, all of them are very different books. So they are from that same universe, and they are those same three characters, but I've written each book very differently. So, every book I write, even if it's in, a series, I want each book to stand alone as its own piece of art, if I can get away with saying that, its own creation.
So in the series too, and in your writing, perhaps through blogs and such, I mean, fan base has been built, I'm assuming, through followers of the blog that have now become followers of the book. What sort of nuances or pieces or what's the word, Easter eggs or things have you given, do you feel, the trilogy or the book themselves? Like, will people get a joy out of experiencing
from readers of the blog?
Yeah, like your fan base so far.
Yeah. Look, I think so. What I did with that blog is I took a lot of it. I took about a friend of mine. I finished with it, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, you know what? And I had some great. Won some awards on that blog, and I had some great feedback on some of the posts that I wrote. And I wrote one about dealing with anxiety, which nobody at that point in my life, including my family, knew was a problem for me. And I was I was suffering from depression at the time. So it was a pretty rough period in my life, but nobody knew about that. Right. So, Google seemed to find that one article, and all of a sudden my blog went from, 10 people reading it who are my friends to, hundreds and thousands of people reading it. So I got a lot of readership, but I finished that blog after 2 years, and I never knew where I wanted it to go. So I sort of felt like I'd failed a little bit, even though I'd created some good content. And a friend of mine, it was actually a friend of mine that taught me that, about the blog posts in the book, because he said, no, this has been a great success. You've written enough, just pick your 50 best blog posts and you've got a book. Go and publish them. And I self-published it. It was a book called Tales from the Tipping Point. The blog itself was called The Weekly Tipping Point. So it was called Tales from the Tipping Point. And, not a lot of people have read that book, but that's okay, because I felt like I had achieved something. And,
absolutely.
And there's definitely things in that that found its way to the stories that I now tell in my fiction.
Well, it's helped your craft too, obviously improving as you say, the construct of words and powers and paragraphs. So,
absolutely,
which is great. So from that merit too, this is a question that's interesting to me to ask authors, especially new authors, who are just starting at the tip of that mountain, this climb to success. And I'm just curious, what do you see as the success? Like, how do you interpret success for yourself?
It's when I write a book, there's really only a few people that I'm trying to impress, right? I want to impress my wife. I write a book and I hope that I know she's going to be the very first person that reads it. And so the only thing I can focus on is she going to like this? I mean, she's a wonderful person, so it's not like she is a harsh critic or any of that sort of stuff, but I worry about that first, right? And then if she turns around and says, yes, I like this book, or no, I think you should change a thing or two, then I'll take that And I know that if I can get it, if she's happy with it, and then I can start to give it to one or two family and friends, and if they're happy with it, then it's like, okay, I've got something good. And what I had with that book is once a few people started to read it and I started to get some really good feedback, people saying, this is their favorite book they've ever read. Like to hear something like that was just amazing, right? And then all of a sudden it was, well, I want as many people in the world to read this book as possible. Like, if I've got something that is a good piece of work, then I want to share it. I want others to get something out of it. So
good.
But really it starts with just trying to get my wife to like it.
Well, that's good. I'm sure she did, because you've gone further through Trilogy, so hopefully she's encouraging you.
Well, I think she was sick of me talking about it, so I think she was keen to finally read it, because it took a few years to get that book done. So
Well, now one of the things too, if we can touch on it, and I think it's good and it's important for new people watching you who don't know who you are and who are going to have a perception of the book, because its title is and can be interpreted with controversy. I want you to appease and explain in the selection of this title and your meaning in the title for you. And it doesn't have any negative connotation to religions or to scopes of beliefs.
And it's called The Man Who Corrupted Heaven. So in this book, I have created my own version of heaven, right? It's not a Christian book, or it's not a Buddhist book or any of these sorts of things. I've just created a version of heaven that I thought, it's not going to upset anybody too much, and I can live with this. It's almost like a political party. Everybody has their role to do. Not everybody knows the whole story of what's going on. They're just sort of going about their tasks. So I created this version of heaven, and obviously the book's called The Man Who Corrupted Heaven. So as people started loving this book and I started getting these messages of support online, it was wonderful. But what started to happen was some people, and I even came up with a name for them, and I hope it doesn't insult anybody, but I called them caps lock Christians. And I did that because people that had never read the book would write these messages in all caps lock, this man is the devil, do not give this. So I started to get a little bit of hate mail over this book, all from people that had never read it, right? So so I'd get up in the morning and there'd be 7 or 8 messages or 9 messages telling me how they'd really enjoyed the book, and there would be one nasty comment about how dare you talk about heaven in this way and corruption. And so, but again, all the people that never read the book, right? So I have a lot of great friends, who have all different religions that they live to, and that's wonderful, and they all love the book. So I think you just got to give it a chance, and maybe those that are upset by the title, maybe they could read it, or maybe they could just ignore it and move on to something.
That's the thing. Everybody's got the choice, and I think if you've got an opinion, you're welcome to express it, but have an informed opinion.
Absolutely.
You can understand what your opinion is about. So I agree with you. I've seen too many of that as well. People, not taking the time to actually, embrace a negative or a positive and actually share their thoughts constructively or logically or as they see it and feel it.
And maybe I'm just doing something a bit right too if I'm upsetting a few people. It's not that I've meant to do that, but maybe I'm just pushing a little bit hard.
Well, I think people's perspectives sometimes need to be challenged too. It's not all about one vision.
That's what this book is about. This book is totally about perspective.
That's good. So tell me, on that basis, and what for you was the hardest part of writing this book? What was, or even the trilogy, but just writing, particularly the starting point, what was the hardest scene or chapter, or what was the hardest thing for you to write?
It's funny. A friend of mine asked me whether he should write a book, and I explained it to him, and I said, what? Writing a book is like running 2 marathons back to back, but in the middle you go, what? I don't even like running. It's easy to get going on a book. You can get really excited and you can get a great run and make great progress early. But especially if you've never written a book before, you can fall into these pits where you just don't know how to get yourself out. And they talk about writer's block. I think I've worked out a good system to get around that now, but I probably had it in this book. There was times when I was just like, because I don't plot, right? I don't know where to go next, and, I remember it was probably 1 or 2 months where I just did not know what the next line was going to be. I was in a hole and I could not get myself out. So there's some real tough things that come with a book, but then you can get through them and you get that second wind. And all of a sudden you go, I've come this far, I can get there. It's like you start the second marathon, right? And then you get close to the end of the book, right?
Yeah.
I don't write thick books, as you can probably tell from this one. I actually Googled how many words is a novel, which I'm sure a lot of new writers do.
Yeah.
And it said, if you can get to 70,000 words, you've written a novel. So I literally, it's like, at the end of a marathon, I see 70,000 words and I just think, how the hell am I going to get there?
Yeah.
And if I do it right, the story structures itself so that, that's where the ending comes in. But I don't want to write books that are, 2 or 3 inches thick.
No.
Some of my favorite books are really short books that deliver an incredible punch. And that's what I want to do.
Short, sharp jabs. That's the way it should be.
I love it. Yeah,
No, it's good. It's good. It's a good read. It's a quick read. And I think it's not the sort of theme or book style you've written that would be elaborative. Like, it's got a very simplified, it's very easy to read. It doesn't need the complicated narratives and expositions. It just needs a nice, clean, and I think I'm looking forward to the trilogy, the 3 of them together.
Yep.
So when did you start learning you wanted to write? Like, when did you start realizing you wanted to write? What was your other epiphany of the day besides the car and the 2 sentences? What was the other moment?
You know what? I always loved writing. Like, even, when I think back, and I'm sure there are so many writers out there that would have a story like this, but I think back to high school, right? And I loved English. Problem was my marks were abysmal, right? So I would hand in something and I was proud of, and I'd go, I'm really proud of this. And the old English teacher would send me back something saying, 11 out of 20 or, something really disheartening. So even when I think back to high school, I liked writing, but I just never got a return from it.
Yeah.
And in music, you can get a return, right? I can write a song and it's done and it's recorded in half a day or whatever it is. So I was able to sort of shift the writing to the music and get a return. But the problem is it's a short return. Unless you write a song that's going to be played for the next 30 years, that song's going to be forgotten pretty quickly, right? And so writing a book gave me the ability to put a message into something that could last. I could see somebody reading one of my books and reading that book in 30 years and still it being relevant. And I've done that on purpose, right? I've stayed away from technology. I've wanted my book to be as simple as possible. I had 3 characters on purpose because I'm the sort of guy who can't remember things very well. So if there's a book with 40 characters in it, I'm lost. Like, I need to know that there's a half a dozen characters at tops, right? Yeah. And so when I sat down, before I even sort of got serious about that book, I sat down and thought, what are the things that I don't like about books? And I thought, well, I don't like overly complicated books. I don't like books with hundreds, casts of thousands. I don't like, and then so I sort of worked backwards from there, and I sort of said, I'm going to write a book that's short, that delivers a big punch. I love philosophy, so I wanted to put some philosophy things in there that I believed in, and that's the book I sat down to write. Good, and you did well. And it could have been a mess, but it turned out okay.
So based on that story of high school and the English teacher and the foreboding red pen, how did you feel about writing this book and then handing it over to that first readership, or even worse, the first editing process?
Yeah.
How did you experience, if you've got such a tentative and maybe still anxious mind? It could have been mostly torturous in some way.
Yeah, it was, and when I say that my wife's the first one to read it, that reads my book, she wasn't the first to read that because it meant so much to me. I wanted it to be better than it was before it got to her. So I actually I went online and I found an editor, a developmental editor in the UK, and I paid money to work with that editor. And you know, I try, like I put it on Upwork or something like that, and this one person, like they all wrote, oh, you know, I'm a professor of this and this, and you know, all these credentials. And I remember this one lady, and she said, "This is such an important book. I'm so glad you've written it." Like she just got it. She understood it. She, you know, she was able to talk to me about my book. So I gave her the book, and she just gave me some wonderful feedback. It was, you know, it was just pleasant. It was nice to work with her. I wish I could get in touch with her again. I can't seem to find her again, but I'll keep trying. Yeah. But then I worked with a copy editor, and I remember the first thing she said to me, and this lady was a very expensive copy editor, and I was told, you know, she'd done some books that we've all heard about. I won't name them because, you know, it's not, you know, I don't want to point a finger. No. But the first thing she said to me is, "For the record, I don't like your book." Wow. She said, "It's not going to stop me doing an amazing job for you, but I don't like it." And I'm like, oh God, I've gone from somebody so supportive to somebody who just, and I think there's some tough subjects in this book, you know, like, and it's not for everyone. This book is not for everyone, but it's powerful for the right people, you know. And she did a great job, but it was a painful process. It was a very painful process that second. But you know what? At the end of that, I had a great product, you know, and not everybody has to love it.
Did you feel you improved your art through that learning as well, that critique?
Yeah, probably. You know, I'm sure I did, is the answer. But, you know, it could have been easier. You know, we probably only fought because I trust those that know better than I do, right? So I don't fight unless I absolutely truly believe in something. Yeah. And right. 99% of what she said was right. And there was only one thing we fought over, which was some of the language I used in the book. And she didn't think it was appropriate. And it's not language I use every day, but it was appropriate for the scene in the book. And maybe it's because I'm an Australian and she was an American, and we use different language here. I don't know. But for the scene in the book, that word was appropriate. And I explained that to her, and her take on that was, well, it's your book, you know? So I was like, anyway. So you know what? You got to fight for things sometimes. You know?
So that's an interesting comment. With that in mind, do you feel like, actually, you know, honestly, do you feel having an ego in being a writer with an ego is a benefit or a hindrance to a good author or a good writer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think if you have the right to have an ego, it's probably a good thing. I don't feel like I have the right to an ego. I've written one book that's been published, and I've got 2 more coming, and they're on their way, and they're going to be great. But I haven't earned the right to have an ego yet. You know, there are so many people out there that know so much more than me, and if they can help me, then I'd be crazy not to listen to that. You know, I'll take whatever feedback I can get, and I'll take it happy.
And I agree that there's elements of levels in ego in perception, but you have established an ego where you put yourself out there, you've put invested time, money, you've asked for support through investing in editing and publishing, you've asked for you know, people, readers, to take this on merit and invest in your talent and believe in you. So again, your ego is putting yourself out there because your ego is also now accessible to people's critique, which means you have to have the confidence and self-awareness to know that it's going to come back to you. So I think what you've done is actually very positive for an ego point, where you've identified in your book the means of your book, the definition of your book, and you've constantly said it here as well, that it's not for everyone. You identify that your ego is specific to the art form you've chosen in the express way of this book. You want to present it. And you're not asking anybody for any pretense or any illusions that this is what it is that you've written. And I think that's a really good place to be, especially as a new author, because you're not, and I asked you about success, so you didn't say, oh, money, you know, the book's got to sell, it's got to be a bestseller. You know, that's success. That is a form of success, but again, that's an ego success. So it's a misperception where your ego, your humility, which plays into your ego, was success is your wife's acceptance or a critique, which I thought was noble. So ego has a merit and ego has a deficiency, I agree. But I think you're using your ego very sensitively and very strategically as part of who you are and what you've written, and aware of that. So I give you credit.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And you're right. Not once have I said anything about money because it's not very important to me. The reason I want so many people to read my book is because it seems to resonate with some people, like they love it, and or it helps them or changes them in some way. And if I've got something that does that, why wouldn't you want to get it in as many hands as possible? That's my take on it.
Absolutely.
And if I can help more people,
Yeah. And me being the publisher who's all about money, I'm happy to forfeit your royalties and keep them.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that separately.
So that's the sort of guy I am, Andrew.
I know you're a good guy. You're a great guy. But then I got to be able to afford to write the next book too.
I'll throw you a couple of things. I want you to keep honorable. I like this Buddhist thing on you.
Okay. All right. Good.
Anyway, moving on. What do you figure is your writing kryptonite? Like what hinders you? There's nothing you can avoid when that happens. You're not going to get to write that day. It doesn't matter what you do, but this is your kryptonite. What happens to you?
I wish there was just one, Bradley. I wish there was just one. I got a couple. I've suffered with anxiety for a long time. A lot of people might not know that about me. They see me, and a lot of people say, "Oh, you're so calm." I'm so calm, sure, but there's a lot going on too. So, I tend to overthink things a lot. So I'll have 27 different versions of where I want the next page to go, or I can really get stuck in that sort of stuff. I take on impossible projects. The book, it wasn't about getting the book finished. It was about creating a book that would stand alongside my heroes on a bookshelf and be, and have its own rightful place. So this book, was never going to just be a book for entertainment. It was going to have to be something, I don't want to say amazing for myself, but it had to be something, that could stand alone, which then means, I have to double think everything. Is it perfect? Is it going to be right? So I sort of, I get a bit anxious around things in that way.
So that anxiety blocks you from writing, stops you from writing, because you do overthink, so you don't actually do productivity. Is that what you're saying?
Sometimes. And it doesn't sort of allow me to, just go with the flow. I'd say in the editing stage, sometimes I have to peel things back and go, what, am I just trying to be too clever there? Like I in that book, I'll be honest, I tried to pour every idea I ever had in my life into that book. So I had to sort of, during the editing, go, some of this is good, but some of it's just not necessary, and pull a few things back.
Yeah.
So.
And then again, is that a self-awareness you have, which is your own. This anxiety may be crippling or frustrating or distracting for you, but I think it also has a huge asset in that it gives you such a clarity of perspective to focus. Like you really want to be 120% just to even avoid the anxiety pain of being uncertain. And I think that's a really strong asset. Like some people look at things differently, but I think you have have utilized it. And I think I feel your self-awareness is not as negative as you want it to be, because you're very positive about your negatives.
You make a really good point, because I did go to counseling for this when I was at my worst. Right?
Yeah.
And the counselor said to me one day, "You are the most self-aware anxiety sufferer I have ever met." And she said, "And you know what? You're the only one that's ever figured out how to make it work for you." Because you sort of want to be a perfectionist at things, and you let it talk to you, and you let it be your guide as this is crap, this is good, but it's exhausting too, right? And that's the problem, she said, is you can keep, firing at this level, but you will wear yourself out. And you'll
That's right.
So I have to manage the two sides of it. One side helps me do great things and and aspire to doing great things, and the other side is, exhausting.
Well, that's when you just need to take that breath.
That's right.
I understand that. So from that perspective, did you do a lot of research on this book? Now, you didn't plot, but you must have had, did you have some sort of element of need to find information out on these elements that you were talking about?
Yeah, I did. Small, for that book, small elements of research. So I'm writing book 3 now, and the research in that is, I've never had to do so much before, right? But on that book, I was Googling things like, what is the temperature inside a crematorium? Like, at what temperature does a casket burn? Like, these were the little things that I was Googling, and little details, which might not even be absolutely necessary for the story, but it was just, I don't mind people going, oh, he's taken a little bit of license there, but I would hate for someone to go, this is just not right. I just want to get close to reality when I write. And, but this third book is taking a bit of research. But the good thing is I'm doing it through stories. So I'm watching other stories and I'm getting good research through them rather than just, what is a measurement or any of that sort of stuff. So it'll still be a good story.
Good. So with that research, I'm not talking generally about all specific details of events, structures, places, experiences. What about people? I mean, are we looking at people and you don't have to say that directly. I mean, have you molded or incorporated elements of all the socializing you've had in exposure to people where you've gone, oh, what a great character that guy's got. I love that trait. Can I use it? So do you do that sort of research where you'll look at characterizations, you'll look at people and think, oh, wow,
So I wrote a novella many years ago. It's my very first writing foray. And people have read it, and some of the feedback I had was, all I can think about is you when I'm reading this. And it made people uncomfortable, right? So I was determined with this book that it would be not me and somebody far away that could never, I didn't want that uncomfortableness in this book.
So you didn't want the association to anything?
Yeah. So when I've tried to look at characters, I do use character traits, and I've certainly used things that I've seen in my life, but they're typically obscure traits that I will see in a TV actress or actor rather than something I've taken directly from a friend or somebody I've worked with, because I would hate for them to sort of go, oh, you did this and nobody's done that yet, which I'm glad. Nobody's come to me and said, how dare you, that was my story you stole, or something like that.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, like for me, I wrote a story years ago too, and I had a dog that would never return a ball. So one of the traits I wanted to write about my dog in the book was that I always brought the ball back. So, you can actually improve people sometimes by adding characteristics. But that's good, because it is about researching who and how the people are in your story, not just the story place or the country or the time zone, but really
it's about character, right? Yeah, it's about the characters.
Yeah, and I think that's a strong asset if you're open to that and you've noticed that too, so which is good. So with that, with the idea of the characters in the book, was it harder to write the opposite sex?
It was a concern because I'd never done it before. So I remember saying to my wife, is it, if I've stuffed anything up, if I've made any mistakes, please tell me. But in saying that, the character I wrote was probably like, it was a lot of women love this book. It was funny. I expected it to be a man's book, I'll be honest with you. And the readership has been mostly women that I've seen. And I just love it because one of them said to me, who's the real character of this story? And I said, I think it's the woman in the story, right? It's a lady in the story called Susan Mitchell, which is the book I'm writing now about her. But the interesting thing about her in that book is the little we know. It's not about all of the things we know, right? So when I write about her, or I don't do it from a, hey, I'm a woman, look at me. I do it from a, these are the things you don't know about this character. Here is some really intriguing things, and then as you go through, there's a couple of points where people just go, oh my God, but it's not because of anything I've written into her. It's because of the actions of her character.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, women are mysteries. I think as writers, as men.
For me, they are.
Yeah. So that's
I love them.
As writers, as men, we have to remember that part of their anonymity is that they are, enigmas, they are mysteries to us. And they have to, they're written that way and understanding that way. And their mindsets and their emotions and their reactions and their intellects all respond differently to us. Which is really hard to construct as a writer,
Yep. And you know what, I've cheated in book 3 because a lot of the book is what other people have said about her, and you're hearing her story from everybody else's perspective, and her own comes in at the very end. So it's I'm almost cheating in that I can't say yet I've written a book from a woman's perspective. There is one I started a few years back, which I'd like to go and write after these 3, which is from a woman's perspective, but I'll just get through these first, and then we'll make those decisions.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like I wrote my first book about a woman when I was 19, and the woman lost her husband, and this woman was the key character of the story. And I got to tell you, I wrote this woman, and all I kept saying to myself is, what would I do if I was a girl? I was 19 years old when I wrote it. What would I do if I was a girl? Had no idea about womanhood and women.
You must have known so much about women at 19, Bradley.
I had this writer from the Fellowship of Writers read it, and she proofed it, and she was like in her 60s.
Yeah.
And she said to me, wow, she said, you're going to be a very interesting husband. Okay, well, I got that one down. There you go. So, with that too, if I can ask, and I think I know the answer to this question, just out of curiosity, I'm going to get you to confirm it for me. But who in your life inspires you to be your best self?
Oh, look, my wife.
I win.
Yeah, she does. But you know what? If
I love the adoration. Don't be ashamed of that. I love that, Andrew. That's so beautiful.
And, I have a wonderful mother as well. So, mum's like reader 2 or 3, right? She's right up there. So it's those two. And it's funny because they finished reading book 2, and both of them didn't like the ending. So I had to go and change the ending, but that's still out. But, but my father, I talk to my father every 2 or 3 days, and without him, I just,
that's good.
I love my family, and they mean the world to me, and
they've been very supportive of you, obviously.
They have. They've been fantastic. So,
which is awesome.
They're the people that matter to me.
Good.
And my children now too.
That's right.
I want to be my best for them.
Yeah, well, that's right. This is their legacy, your legacy to them too. Part of that mystery.
I hope so. I hope they read it one day. They haven't read it yet, but I've got teenagers, and they assure me they will, and that's okay.
That's all right. Once it's online and they don't have to do anything but put the screen, it'll be ready.
That's right.
I know. Technology.
It's on Netflix.
I know. Once it's a movie.
Or a PlayStation game.
Do you what do you like to do when you're not writing? Now, now that your kids are all grown up a bit too, so you're not having. What do you do? What do you like to do when you're not writing?
You know what? A few things. I still play guitar, and I love playing guitar. So my wife says, I like hearing you play because I know that your mind is shut off when you're playing guitar, right? Maybe when I should be doing other things, but I do love it. It sort of puts me in a little spell for a while. I fill my brain with stories. If I'm not writing or working, and I'm reading, I'm always reading something, and I've always got Audible going at any spare moment. So I just fill my brain with stories.
Yeah.
I'm getting into watching even documentaries on Netflix at the moment, because they're just helping me find little things that I can use in books. So I don't have a lot of downtime from thinking, if that makes a lot of sense, but I enjoy it all, and I'm up till 1 a.m. most nights, because I'm not much of a sleeper, but I it's not because I'm sitting around doing nothing. It's because I'm either watching something or playing music or working on a book, or I'm pretty productive.
It's good.
Try and keep myself productive.
Yeah. And now as you find the kids older, you've got a little bit more of your own time as well to write.
Yeah.
Because I think when they're younger, it's very difficult to get a little
That's
bit more
right,
time.
absolutely.
And that's why you have to do it late at night. So,
Yeah.
So just out of that too, just for the final question I'd like to ask you tonight, if I may, is during your experiences, you're still at the start of I think it's going to become a very good career for you in the coming years, but what do you want to share, or would you share with someone starting up as a writer at the moment? What advice would you give someone?
You know what? The thing that really helped me was during the blog, I wrote, and it was the first time I sort of wrote seriously, and I mentioned it earlier. I wrote about something quite traumatic in my life, right? And that really helped my writing so much, because it went from just being, little funny little tales or stories or whatever, or self-help stuff, to writing about something emotional and important. And what I say to people who are thinking about writing is, before you sort of go, I'm going to write a book, and, because I would say, just pick something traumatic in your life and write about it, and just get it out. And then feel how good that feels to get it onto a page, or, and then get somebody to read it. It's going to be difficult, right? You're going to feel awful, and you're probably going to watch them out of the corner of your eye while they do it, because the first time you get somebody to read something, it's painful. It's like when I give somebody my book, I don't want to leave the room. I want to stay until they're finished. I want to make sure. I've had to force myself, But what I would say is, learn to write about things that are important to you first.
That's very good.
Before you go and try and write a story, because what typically happens is people come up with an idea, right? That idea I came up with, that's not my story. The transformation of the characters is my story.
Yeah.
And if I just sat down without any of the, the work I did, or reading about writing books or the podcasts, I wouldn't have known that. And I would have just tried to write a clever plot, which, there's plenty of great books that have that as well, but that's not what I wanted to be. I wanted to write impactful things. Good. And to write impactful things, you've got to write impactful things about yourself first, I believe.
Definitely. No, great. Well done. And it is self-explanatory as well. Authorship is taking that chance. When I said to my grandfather, when I was a young tacker, I said, I'm going to be a great writer. He handed me the book called The World According to Garp. And he said, if you read that and you still want to write, good luck. So I read The World According to Garp, and for about 3 years I was depressed. But then I got it, and I went, yep.
I haven't read it yet. I'm going to have to read it now.
If you want to be a writer or an author, I tell anyone, just read The World According to Garp. It's a story about an author. I mean, the film's good too, but the book is so much more involved in the intricacies of the inner mind, narrative, that is just brilliant. So have a look at that if you do get a chance. But for today, I'm going to wrap it up with you, Andrew. This young man, Andrew Hood, has written The Man Who Corrupted Heaven. It is available everywhere books are sold as of February. So please grab a copy, support independent authors, support Australian authors, and you'll love this book. Andrew has done a wonderful job. I hope you've enjoyed watching him tonight. So thank you for your time, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, Bradley. Appreciate it.
So good night, everybody. Thank you for watching. And remember, buy this book. It's awesome. So thank you again. Good night.
Thanks.